A crowd of people flock to a mountainside. They follow a carpenter's son who turned into an itinerant preacher somewhere along the way, who has recently developed a reputation for healing the sick and the wounded. Rumors abound about this man, and those rumors will only grow after this day, because these people are hungry. They are in need of a meal, but as Amanda taught us, they were hungering for something more as well. These people wanted a king. They live under the oppressive rule of Rome, and they long for someone to set them free from that deadly power. They're not disappointed, at least at first. 5,000 hungry people are fed in a miracle that reminds them of all of their favorite stories, the ones their grandparents told them, the ones the old rabbis told again and again. That time when God sent manna, the miracle bread to feed the people in the wilderness after Moses led them out of Egypt, freeing them from slavery. And here they are, coming to seek healing, maybe a word of wisdom. And after their whole lives of hearing of this miracle bread, they get a chance to taste it themselves at the hands of this rabbi. And they know, this is the one. Moses led us out of Egypt. This is the one who will renew the line of David. He will free us from Rome. They're ready. They have seen a sign from God. They recognized it rightly as a sign from God. They have named this man their prophet, and they are ready to make him king, whether he is ready for that or not. There's more hope in the air than these people have known in their lifetimes. Everything is going wonderfully until the king runs away before they can crown him. So there's a small delay, but that's okay. Humility is a good quality to have in a king. So they will simply go and find him again to crown him. And they do. They chase him all the way across the Sea of Galilee to Capernaum. There they find him. They ask Jesus some questions, and he ignores them and changes the subject. He starts talking about bread, manna, and blood. Children here today, because we're not standing here or sitting here in an adult worship service today. We are here gathered as the family of God, and that is all of us who are a part of the family of God. From Javon to Jack, we are here today, gathered. If you don't have the privilege of talking to our children regularly, you might know that they are not just observers here, but they are members. They participate, and they pay attention even when you think they're looking the other direction. And if you ever talk to them during or after a sermon, you will know that they ask really good questions, which is why I was very nervous when I got this text today. Because with children here, I cannot in good faith hide behind the big words. There is something that has to be acknowledged here, and I don't have an elegant way to say it. This text is weird. It is remarkably strange. It can be easy for us to forget that if we have heard it many times before, because the more we hear something repeated, the more normal it seems. And so perhaps we ought to take a cue from Jesus' listeners in this text, or maybe from a child sitting next to you whose head spun when Jesus said, "Eat my flesh," because that is an odd thing to say. Perhaps then we will understand the surprise, the reason people found this text so difficult enough to walk away. So for the children, and for anyone here who rightly finds this text startling, I do have to give a disclaimer. We are not vampires. We are not zombies. We are not cannibals. You do not have to be afraid that anyone at church is going to try to get you to start eating people as a part of our worship. That is not what this text is about. Jesus says really strange things here. So strange that in next week's text, a whole lot of people who were about to make him king are going to walk away. It's a stark turn from that moment that Albert led us to 3 weeks ago, when they were all gung-ho for him to be their king. They recognized the sign, they recognized a prophet, they saw a glimpse of the divine, and they chased it across the sea, but then it just got too strange to stick around. For those of you who haven't spent a lot of time in our children's classes, there are a couple words that come up a lot when we discuss the person of Jesus and the things that he teaches, and they are very relevant today. One of them is a metaphor. When we compare two things that are not literally the same, often to make a point or paint a picture with our words. Ellie just read one from the book of Proverbs, where wisdom is compared to a woman who builds a house and hosts a banquet. The book of John is no stranger to metaphors. Jesus is called light, a door, a shepherd, a vine, bread. The second word that we use all the time is mystery. Those things that God has shown us that we don't fully understand. Things that might defy the logic of the world in which we live, but that we believe to be true anyway. In many churches around the world, people every week will do something together called proclaiming the mystery of the faith. Someone at the front will say, "Let us proclaim together the mystery of the faith," and all together the group will say, "Christ has died, Christ has risen, Christ will come again." We openly admit there is mystery in the death and resurrection of Jesus, something that we cannot quite grasp, but that we recognize as wonderful. And just as there is metaphor in this text, there is mystery at work here. In John, this teaching takes place far away from the upper room where Matthew, Mark, and Luke record Jesus saying very similar words. That upper room is in Jerusalem towards the end of the story. And here we are in Capernaum at the beginning. And yet, for those of us who know the story across all four Gospels, we cannot deny that there is a familiarity here. That this text evokes an image of Jesus breaking bread, saying, "This is my body, this is my blood." That it reminds us of the table before us that we celebrate every week. There is a great deal of metaphor and mystery in the life and teachings of Jesus, and both exist in this text today. There's a comparison of a broken body to broken bread, both that sustain life in different ways, and there is this wondrous reality of a God who meets us in seemingly ordinary things to make extraordinary moments. If you ask every person here who teaches Bible at a college or seminary level where the metaphor of bread ends and the mystery begins, you are probably going to get a a different answer. Mysteries are difficult that way. We can't pin them down so easily. We try. People have invented so many 5- and 6-syllable words to describe our exact understanding of what we think is happening at this table, what Jesus means when he speaks these words, I am bread, and what that means for what we do here today and every Sunday. And those words are helpful. They spark wonderful debate. They help us chase the curiosity that God has given us to use our intellects to come a little closer to understanding the divine. And they can also provide the temptation to hide behind them, because it's a little frightening to admit that there are certain things we do, even on a weekly basis, that we do not fully comprehend. But whether we understand it entirely or not, God brings blessings anyway in this moment. We don't spend a lot of time talking about sacrament here at Mentor, but it would be a disservice to this text not to. We believe that there are certain moments in the life of the church, in the life of Christians, that are holy, sacred, where God comes a little closer to us. The Catholic Church teaches 7. Most Protestant churches, including Churches of Christ, teach 2. One of those, in most cases, only happens once in your life, at your baptism. But the other one, we do every week when we celebrate communion, so much so that it can seem routine and ordinary. How strange it is to be so routinely invited into the presence of God that we might consider it an ordinary thing. How strange, and how very like the God who became a human, who told stories about sheep, and who preached from a fisherman's boat. How very like that God to make it so. People all over the world find the nourishment they need to live in whatever form of bread they make in their culture. With whatever grains are available to them in their part of the world, they make something that is almost always delicious and that sustains life. But ordinary bread, and even miracle bread, only staves out of hunger for a day, as Jesus says here. All of the ancestors who ate manna eventually died. And here Jesus offers himself as true sustenance, the way to live forever, even better, the way to abide in the presence of God. Our bread today was made by Sue. It was laid out with juice by the Dohertys. It will be served by some combination of people here in our audience. Ordinary people, ordinary elements. But make no mistake, this before us is the table of Christ that we are going to gather before in just a few moments. Jesus is our host, and Jesus invites us to take, to eat, to drink, to receive the gift of God that is communion. It is a part of our ordinary weekly service. Ordinary people prepare it. An ordinary person who has done nothing more or less than receive the grace of God will guide us through this weekly celebration. But the gift is not an ordinary ritual, because God makes it holy and sacred, a moment when Jesus will join us and commune with his church. It's a beautiful mystery that God invites us to take part in together, a moment when heaven meets earth, when God's people are united as one, and Jesus, our host, joins us in a feast, one that reminds us of all of the feasts of the past, of the Passover, the provision of manna, the feeding of the 5,000, the Lord's Supper on the night of Jesus' arrest, and all the celebrations of Eucharist since. We remember the past when we partake of this, and we join all who have gone before us in proclaiming the death and resurrection of Jesus. and in celebrating the presence of Christ here today in our midst, we look forward to the promised feast to come, the one that will happen when God's resurrection and reconciliation comes and makes everything right again, when all of the promises of eternal life have been fulfilled. After feeding the people, Jesus speaks to them of mysteries and offers them resurrection and eternal life. The offer isn't made to those who understand. Jesus doesn't say, the wisest among you, those who can parse every sentence, who can exegete the text well, you will receive eternal life. No. Jesus offers these gifts freely to any who will believe and receive a gift. Holy bread, whether they understand the difficult teaching or not. All they have to do is stay like Peter did. Similarly, we are invited today to receive a gift in just a few moments. A blessing of God that is not contingent upon whether or not we are able to understand the metaphysics of miracles and mysteries. We are simply asked to come, to take, to eat, to drink, to receive God's blessing, and somehow, here, in an old building, as ordinary people in the middle of little old Abilene, Texas, ordinary bread and juice will become something extraordinary, something sacred, a place where Jesus will meet us here.